I am Elly. I have been her best friend since our boys met in kindergarten. Her name was Sue Brown Triplett. So Sue has always been very active her whole life. Her parents took them skiing. They were either playing tennis or skiing. And so she always did moguls. She led the ski team at Plainfield. And as you know, we don't have ski hills. So they would go to Four Lakes and then they would go to Villa Olivia. And eventually she found out that she needed to have her foot actually completely reconstructed. She is actually in medical books because she was skiing and exercising, doing everything on like several broken bones that were never completely corrected. So the reason I talk about this is she was on Match.com and she had just had her foot done and she was taking a while to heal, and she had met Craig. And he was, she's like, let's touch base again in like 2 months. I should be healed up even more. Unfortunately, the reason she didn't heal so well is in 2015, we found out she had cancer on the right side of her body. She had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So everything that had happened on the right side of her body, her foot, she had dental work done that just didn't heal very well, was due to this. And she didn't catch it or wasn't diagnosed. So they just continued communication. He ends up saying, you know what, I don't care that you're on that like little scooter thing. I'll pick you up. I'll take you to dinner. And she's like, yeah, it's such a hassle, like getting me in and out of a car. And he's like, I don't care. Nicest guy ever. I'll come over, pick you up. And she's like, I don't know, this guy is pretty cool. He's so understanding. So they started steadily dating. They both were previously married. She had 2 kids, he had 3. It was very obvious that they were really digging each other. Soon enough, Craig moved into her place, sold his place. And I remember Sue saying that she was at his house and he was like meticulous about everything. He's single dude, meticulous. And Sue was not. Like, Sue had a dishwasher that just didn't work, for like 4 years, and she didn't care. And fast forward to their engagement in 2013. They got married July 2014. They started building a house right away in Plainfield. Big enough house. It was a 5-bedroom with a pool for all the kids to be able to stay there. They move into the house. It's finished February 2015. They have like a housewarming party, and we were over there. And I was in a blended marriage at the time. So my now ex-husband had 2. I have 4. So we were in similar situation. My ex-husband said, Craig pulled me aside and said, how do you deal with Elly and her kids making such a huge mess? And he's like, well, actually, it's my kids. And, we just deal with it, make them clean up, have consequences if they don't, and, pick up after yourself. And he's like, oh my God, I just can't stand this. That's interesting because he went from like what seemed like a really cool, casual guy, actually kind of quiet, more of an introvert, he was vocalizing his concerns, and they were kind of nasty a little bit, like a little bitey. June of that year, around Father's Day, they had started talking about getting a dog. His kids wanted to buy a dog. She had a dog that she rescued and brought into the marriage. And a week later, he went back and got the sister of that puppy, Husky. And that's when they had this giant fight so bad that she left the house and she called me like, I don't know who this guy is. We just had this blow up fight. I don't even recognize him. And I was like, well, what was it about? Well, it was about this dog, but it just kind of spun out of control. And he was like screaming to me about my kids and about, stuff. It seems like he's held in a lot of frustrations. I'm like, okay, well, you probably did the right thing by leaving, give him some time to cool down, whatever. And things kind of seemed to go back to normal, but they were having more and more confrontations, she noticed. At the end of July that year, 2015, that's when they found out she had cancer. Again, a little bit of backstory. She's been a teacher her whole career in Plainfield. She started at Plainfield Central and then went over to Plainfield North when it was built. And she was always voted from the seniors and things like that, most popular teacher. She's extremely warm. And like when I first met her, when our boys were in kindergarten together, she just was so open and unconditional. I felt so comfortable around her immediately. I was telling her things that I had never told anybody else. So she had this huge support system. The kids were coming over with like signs and this, huge card they passed around, everybody signed, and people were making her cookies, all this kinds of stuff, because she was told, just take the year off of school, go through your chemo. There was 6 rounds of chemotherapy. Come back and visit whenever you want. But I think, they're like, you should just recover, because she was like, oh no, after I'm done with 6, I'll come back. Well, it's not, we don't know what to anticipate, you know what I'm saying? So literally the first round of chemotherapy, she thought, she literally said, I felt like my head was going to pop off my body, because and she thought she was going to aspirate. She was like so sick. And he was a little kind of ticked off, like a little irritated by the whole, everything that was involved with her cancer. Her students, can't they leave you alone? Can't they let you? And she was like, they just want to, wish me well. And she was like, it's fine, as long as she felt okay. I started to feel like, maybe he's a little jealous of, they're completely different people, right? But they say sometimes opposites attract, and you never know. So her first chemotherapy appointment, he goes with her. The doctor was out of Northwestern in the city, and they come home, they have the date. So she knows, basically for, the day of and the next probably 2 days, she's out of commission, and he's going to take her and sit with her through the process and things like that. And she goes to bring her daughter to the bus stop, and he literally drives by and is like, have fun at chemo, and like ditches her. So she called me. She's like, what just happened? Like, is he coming back? What's going on? Well, no, someone else had to go with her. It was just bizarre stuff like that. He would do it always when she had left. They had gotten into so many fights that she was now sleeping in her room. There was 2 twin beds in her room. And one of the nights he had snuck in there when she was sleeping and tried to like pull off of her finger her engagement and wedding ring and said, you don't deserve it. Very outlandish accusations of her, God knows doing what, while she's totally sick with cancer, trying to, she was in her pool a lot. She had salt water in there, which is kind of better for her recovery. So she was trying to do yoga in there, and she was losing her hair. And so he was accusing her of like cheating on him and things like that. So basically, as time went on, it was just kind of consistently getting worse. She was smoking medicinal marijuana, and what she would do is go into their bathroom, lock the door so the kids wouldn't come in, and the tub was a corner tub, so she had windows behind her. She would open them up, and then she would just relax and do that, after the kids went to bed. Well, this one night he had come up and was like pounding on the door and saying, what are you doing in there? Like, are you dealing drugs? Are you, like, accused her of being a drug dealer, took the back of the hammer, the claw part, and hammered out the door handle to get in there, which he did. And she's like, what is going on? Like, he did that when she was in their shower. It was glass, and he almost like, she thought she was, the glass was just going to implode on her because he was like pounding. He was just exceedingly getting worse. We felt, as her friend group and even her mom, like, she didn't want to tell her dad anything because he had heart issues. So her mom kind of knew maybe 50% of what was going on. We felt, okay, something's got to give. We need to get her and the kids away from Craig. Something has to happen. He was like calling the cops on her, saying she was dealing drugs. Made her stand up in front of all 5 of their kids and apologize for being a drug dealer when she wasn't. I mean, it was just insane. He got rid of the medicinal marijuana she had already had. And she's like, that was really the only thing that kind of calmed my stomach, that calmed my nausea. So she was talking to her doctor about getting something different, and he's like, you can try this, that, and the other, and nothing really worked. The day before things happened, she had gotten a clean bill of health. There was no cancer in her system. She had had 3 chemotherapy sessions, and so she had there was no cancer. They said just continue with the 3 more, just to be sure. And she had gone to school. She had baked and brought stuff to the kids and like went around to her classes, said hello. And then the very next day, like, I know they had a terrible weekend, and she's like, I think I need to make this appointment with a divorce attorney. Just go in. It was like a free consultation, one of those things. She was going on a Tuesday, and she called me that morning and said that he had passed her again at the bus stop, and I can't honestly remember the details, but she was totally upset And she's like, can you have lunch? And I said, yeah, just come to my office. And we had gone to have lunch. We were there and she was just crying her eyes out that why did this happen? How did she choose this guy? She thought this was a fairy tale love that was gonna, be for the rest of her life. She was just heartbroken that she had made the choice, feeling somewhat responsible for choosing him, bringing him into, her life and her kid's life. And as, a responsible parent, that's kind of typically things that you look at as you're dating someone. I'm like, we didn't know this. I mean, we didn't have a hint of this at all when we first met him. We didn't see anything glaringly bad until the wedding day when it was one person there for him. So she said, all right, I'm going to go to this consultation. And, we didn't realize that one of her former students was our waitress, and we were the only people in there because it was like a Tuesday morning or like 11 a.m. And we were leaving, we paid our bill, and we noticed the girl was crying because she saw Sue crying. And she wrote on the bill, "Stay beautiful, Miss Tripp." They always called her Miss Triplet or Miss Tripp, students. So she hugged her and she's like, "I'm okay, just going through some stuff, whatever." But it was kind of a testament to like how people cared for her, even her former students. I mean, just a wonderful person. So on the way to the attorney, she calls me and she's like, "Hey, if Craig calls you, tell him we went to lunch." And I'm like, "We did." I'm like, "We did." She's like, I know, but did you keep the receipt? He might want to ask. Like, he was at that point where he was just like, "Show me proof," things like that. And I'm like, "Just take a deep breath and go to your appointment." She's like, "I think he's probably following me." She had suspected, like, following her to Jewel, to Walmart, like silly stuff. And he wasn't working at that point, by the way. He had quit his job, accused his job of like ridiculous things. And actually, the Plainfield Police Department did go talk to, he worked in investment. They said, yeah, all of a sudden he just turned into this completely different person, started, like saying that they were trying to kick him out or fire him, and he ended up quitting. At 5 o'clock, I left my job. I called her, said, "What are you up to? How's dinner?" They were supposed to have a family dinner. And she said they got into this huge fight. And he was like, "Oh, are you divorcing me? Are you divorcing me?" And like in her face. And he was at that point, he had put a lock on the refrigerator and said that Sue and her kids needed to figure out where they could store their own food. So she said when that started happening, she was hurrying to get things together, left the house and went to her old house. She was like, "We're at Pear Tree." That's where the street they lived on. And I said, "Just get your stuff and come over. We'll eat pizza here or whatever. The Cubs are playing and, we'll just hang out here." As she was telling me the story, Craig had called and said, "I found something." She's like, "Well, what was it?" And he's like, "You won't believe it. He's a criminal, just like I thought he was." So fast forward to after and, discovering everything, it was an airsoft gun, which I knew he had. And he had a $10 bill in there, and that was it. And it was a locked up little case because it was an airsoft gun. And Sue was always like, this is where it's going to stay, and it's going to stay in my room. Well, he had moved it back into his room. That was the only thing he did wrong. So he's screaming at her for like 15 minutes. She's like trying to reason with him. "Craig, no. All right, Craig, I'll take a look at it when I get home." They hang up, and then he immediately calls me and starts to scream about Sue. She had gotten a text from him at that point saying he was leaving. And so she's like, "I'm going to take this opportunity, run home, get stuff for the kids for school," because they were going to spend the night at my house, get our cancer meds. And I said, "Okay, fine, just wait. Let's call the Plainfield police so they can escort you." She's like, "I don't need an escort. He's not going to be home. And if he does see that, he'll be so pissed." I'm like, "Let him be mad. He's already mad. Let them escort you. It's not a big deal." She was so scared he was going to blow up at her for having an escort. You know what I mean? They say, "Call us as soon as you leave Elly's house." So she goes to her car. She's like, "I'll be back in 5 minutes." She lived maybe a mile away. So we assume she's going to call. She gets to her house, and my sister was her neighbor. This is a brand new subdivision, so there actually was an empty lot and then my sister's house. And kind of waiting. I call Sue's phone. She doesn't answer. I'm like, she probably left her car running. I'm assuming all these things. So I call my sister, and my sister's a nurse practitioner. She had just gotten home from work, and I said, "Hey, will you just check in her driveway, see if she's there?" "Yeah, I see her car. It's in the driveway." I'm like, "Okay." As I say to her, "Do you see the police?" And she's like, "No, not yet." And so she goes, "Craig's pulling out of the garage." And I'm like, "Wait, he's there?" And she's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, weird. And she's like, man, he is taken off. And I was like, oh, maybe they got in a huge fight. So I'm like, and the cops are still not there. She's like, no. I hang up and I call Plainfield Police. One goes to go over there. One comes to my house to find out what the heck's going on, right? That's when he pulled in, turned around like Yui and left. And I said, oh, that was just him. So since it was a new subdivision, it was a street that had been extended, and it wasn't really, like if you typed it in, you couldn't really almost find it on Google Maps or whatever. It was so brand new. So she like goes out to the end of her driveway, waves them down. And at that point I said to get all the kids in the car, drop them off at your house, except at the time, my husband at the time was home. So I left my kids there. As we're loading them up, my sister says, oh, she's not answering the door. Maybe she doesn't hear us. Can you give us the garage code? She starts to open the garage and the cop says, I need you to wait down here so I can secure the first floor or whatever. And my sister goes, I know exactly where she is. Let's just go upstairs. Well, as we're driving there, I hear my sister scream and say, I need to give her CPR. At that point, we drop the kids, rush over there. We actually had gotten there maybe 3 seconds before, like we saw the lights from the ambulance. They pull up. I had run up the stairs. They wouldn't let me go in. And when I got there, my sister said, he killed her. He killed her. They had found a pulse. So they were bagging her and brought her out and brought her to Rush Copley. That was the closest place to bring her, and we had gone there. My sister said that she wanted to, try to stop the bleeding. He had stabbed her so badly that it had left a pretty significant gash in her stomach. And so she wanted to stop the bleeding from there, but since she had cancer on the right side of her body, they put the port over here, direct line right to her heart. So unfortunately, obviously that was the fatal stabbing. He had chased her up and down the stairs. Come to find out, he had hid in a closet in that main hallway and ambushed her. We had been at Rush Copley after they had pronounced her, and the detectives were there with us, and we just didn't know where Craig was at that point. So come to find out, he had driven onto I-55, left his car in drive. The knife was in the car. He got out and walked in front of a semi. Yeah, that's what happened.